Welcome to the second season of the Fourth Folio. Thrilled to be here. Happy New Year. I'm Jay Michaels, and I and my co-host Rodney Hakim have spent our lives pursuing the great bard William Shakespeare. We have studied his plays. We have performed his plays. In terms of myself, I was artistic director and then eventually board president emeritus of Genesis Repertory Ensemble, which spent over a decade analyzing and presenting Shakespeare's plays. Now, I'm the kook of the two of us because many years ago in a bookstore, I found this lovely old book. You really can't see it through the lighting, but there's the picture of the bard. And I was shocked when it said supplement to the plays of William Shakespeare, which have been ascribed to him, but which are not included with his writing in modern editions. And it blew my mind. And suddenly I wanted to learn all I could about the plays because apparently there's a Shakespeare conspiracy out there. And I wanted to learn much more. So I tend to sit in the shadows of these and just listen carefully for these clues. And aside from the honor of working with Rodney, we are lucky enough to get very distinguished guests to join us for this program. I'm going to turn this now over to the smart one, Rodney Hakim, and he's going to introduce the equally smart and terribly intimidating to me guests for our program. Rodney, take it away.
Thank you, Jay. Jay is being very modest. Jay not only worked with Genesis Rep with all the things they did for at least a decade, and some of which I was fortunate enough to be part of in some of my years making my way through the New York Shakespeare scene.
Brilliant.
But beyond that, Jay has done just a gamut of Shakespearean projects on stage and on screen, and he continues to, he teaches and he does all kinds of things. So Jay is one of the people that I really admire in the world of the Shakespeare scene, and whose vast experience I always enjoy hearing about and learning from. So Jay, it's a pleasure to be here tonight and to join you for our first episode of 2021.
Thank you.
And I couldn't think of better guests to have and better subject matter to have than our two distinguished guests tonight, one of whom is Paul Sugarman of the Instant Shakespeare Company. Anyone who has been in the New York Shakespeare scene for even a day, I'm sure, knows Paul Sugarman all too well. Paul Sugarman and the Instant Shakespeare Company are an institution in the New York Shakespeare scene, and they have been presenting Shakespeare in public libraries around New York for, Paul, how long have you guys been at it?
Well, this will be our 22nd season in 2021 because we started.
And there's very few Shakespeare companies, there are very few companies of anything that last for more than 20 years in New York. So my hat's off to you, Paul, for your longevity and for bringing Shakespeare to New York for as long as you have. What's the motto of the Instant Shakespeare Company?
Shakespeare for everyone.
Shakespeare for everyone, and it truly is. Whenever I've seen your shows and I've ever been a participant in your shows, it really is. It's you have a wide range of actors. The audience gets involved, especially now with the Zoom versions of it. The audience often becomes the actors, and it's a wonderful thing. You take it to it's you don't limit it to just the main library there on 42nd Street with the newly refurbished lions in the front. You take it all around New York. Where around New York do you take your readings, Paul?
Well, yeah, we've done it at a number of branch libraries in New York. Actually, the Riverside branch and Columbus, Muhlenberg. There are a number of them. Epiphany, where even the Morningside Heights branch and the 67th. It's really great because a lot of them have really gotten excited about it and have them and it about 3 of the branches we've done readings of all of the plays at the branches over the years because we've been doing them long enough there.
And I tell you what, Paul, I myself at some point during my career as a director and a producer, I was doing a series of my own in association with the public libraries in New York, and it's no easy feat. There's a lot of administrative things that and challenges that you have to overcome to be able to present works in the public libraries, and a lot of red tape and things like that. So the fact that you're able to do it, and not just in one, but in pretty much every library in New York for the past 22 years is truly a feat. So I really admire your efforts, Paul.
I say with great boast and pride, I met Paul, oh my goodness, it is 20 years ago or 21 years ago. You did a piece of your season at my theater on 74th Street, East 74th Street, and I never forgot that. It was a marvelous experience, and I have a story which at the end I'll tell you. But I still have. You gave me a button that says Shakespeare for everyone, and I still have that button. So when you said that, I was like, it just transported me back to that.
Yeah. And then in addition to Paul Sugarman, the very talented Paul Sugarman, we have another fantastic guest tonight joining us. We have Maria McNair of the online teaching resource, which is Shakespeare for All. Hello, Maria.
Hello, thank you so much for having me with this wonderful group of guests.
It's a pleasure having you. Maria, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Shakespeare for All.
Yes, so I did my PhD in English at Harvard University, focusing on Renaissance literature, Shakespeare in particular. And when I was approached by a friend, a colleague of mine who works for a studio called Lyceum, subset of Himalayan Media, that they wanted to do a Shakespeare course designed for adult lifelong learners who didn't have a lot of background in Shakespeare, who wanted to get into Shakespeare, learn more with something engaging and accessible, I was thrilled, because this has always been part of my goal as an academic, as a scholar, as a teacher, is to be able to share things with an ever broader audience. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to create the course where we do interviews with, world-class Shakespearean scholars. We have original performances by top Shakespearean actors, and we put these together in a way that assumes people haven't read the play, but can bring them together, not just to understand what's going on in the story, but to understand sort of the key interpretive questions the play is asking, and bring them into join that conversation that the plays have, always been sparking, in the last 400 years. And I'm looking forward to having one of those kinds of conversations tonight.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, Maria, I was browsing through your Shakespeare for All website this afternoon, and I was very impressed by all the content you already have. It's a young website. It's only been up for 6 months or a year or something like that?
We launched in October 2020.
So not even, maybe it's about 3 months or something. And You already have a ton of content on there. You have already course information about Shakespeare's sonnets and poems. You have, I think it's 12 plays you already have courses on.
We're getting there, yeah.
We're getting there. And something that caught my eye as a unrepentant geek is a course about Shakespeare and Game of Thrones. So for all of our blood and gore fanatics, if you want to learn more about the Red Wedding vis-a-vis Shakespeare, this is this is the place to go. So, and that's shakespeareforall.com.
I give you both so much credit. It's rather ironic. We have Shakespeare for everyone and Shakespeare for all.
Exactly.
There is such a stereotype. There's such a stigma behind Shakespeare. Students always suddenly blanch when they hear the dreaded name. For you to be able to, both of you, to make it accessible to audiences, to make it open and available, I think it is absolutely wonderful. And I commend both of you so highly for what you're doing.
Absolutely. So Paul and Maria, we thank you so much for joining us here tonight on our first episode of 2021. And Jay, tonight, what are we talking about?
We are talking, we might as well pick up the newspapers and talk about what has just happened, because Shakespeare's Coriolanus has just happened in the newspapers. It is said to be Shakespeare's most political piece. They talk of Republican overtones within it. It is basically a leader who enjoys leading the people, but he doesn't like his people, and it chills me when I hear that as part of the plot there, because again we hear that in the headlines, and I'm really fascinated from hearing both of you and Rodney to talk about the play itself, and while it takes place in Rome, how its message seems to translate. One question I'll throw out there, and it could just be the foundation underneath. I have always said that Shakespeare is clairvoyant. I've meant it in terms of religion. I've meant it in terms of ethnicity with his Merchant of Venice, with his Othello, so many other pieces. You say to yourself, how did he know? Even the sense of women's roles, and Coriolanus again has a very powerful women's role, and you don't find that in Renaissance drama. So I open it up to both of you in terms of Coriolanus. Tell me your thoughts on this piece. Ladies first.
Maria?
So I was actually just revisiting a lecture given by Gordon Teskey, one of my advisors at Harvard. He talked about the politics of Coriolanus as the interest of Coriolanus lying in the future, because the political situation it was examining was something that had been sort of happening, available in the time of ancient Rome, and then had kind of like disappeared from the European stage under, Christian feudalism in the medieval period, and would only sort of emerge in England really after the Glorious Revolution, the real idea that you have politics as competing interests among different groups who have to negotiate, compromise with each other for power. This was emerging in Shakespeare's time. Republicanism was an idea that was being talked about, debated. King James, who came into power maybe about 5 years before the play was written, had an absolutist theory of power, that it was all invested in the king by God and flowed outward to him, and he had sort of total authority over that. The parliament didn't agree with him. They were supposed to represent the interests of the lords and the more common people. So that was an emerging idea, but it became sort of the defining idea of modern day politics, especially as Christianity and the idea of power coming from God became more and more sort of evacuated from the political scene. Even if it's an idea that we invoke, we recognize politics as all of these groups have a right to a voice, or at least they're going to have a voice, and we have to work out how we're going to negotiate power among them. Coriolanus is maybe his clearest statement of that, his clearest examination of that, and in that way it's very forward-looking.
Now, Paul, you with the Instant Shakespeare Company have done Coriolanus. You've done each play in the Shakespearean canon once a year for 22 years. So you're quite familiar with this play, I would gather from all your experience. Can you give us a thumbnail summary for listeners who are not quite up to speed about what Coriolanus is all about and where it fits into the larger theme of Roman plays within the Shakespeare? Can you give us a quick summary of Coriolanus and what it's all about?
Well, it's the tragedy of Coriolanus starts with a rebellion going on, that the people of Rome have risen up because they can't afford food, and basically then you get to the voice of the state, the charming voice of the state in Menenius comes in to sort of charm the people, and then Coriolanus comes in. Caius Marcius, who is of the noble house, comes in, and he's for the nobles, and he just thinks the people are worthless, basically. But then, because of all of this unrest in Rome, there's these wars with the Volscians, and that is something that Caius Marcius gets very excited about, because that's what he likes to do, is go to war.
He's a general. He's a warrior.
Yeah, he's a general. And actually, the initial rebellion is sort of calmed by the idea that the people get some tribunes, that they have a couple of elected people who are representing the people. So it's not just the nobles or the rich people getting to decide to do whatever they want to do, and setting the price for grain so high that people can't afford to live. And as always with it's a political thing, it's good to distract it with a war. So he goes off to war at Coriolanus, where he defeats them, and he's such an incredible warrior. I mean, that he just goes in and he basically wins the city himself. It's like they attack, they burst in, he bursts in, like none of his guys follow him in. He goes into the city, and then kicks butt, and
he's like the Elizabethan Rambo or something like that. He goes in, he kills everyone himself.
Yeah, and in every production, and it's well worth. You see, get him come out all spattered in blood because he's killed all these people. And
right.
and so he comes back to Rome to be honored with that, and to be made consul, which is one of the leaders of Rome. But the tribunes who've been elected by the people know how much he stands for the patricians, the nobles, and are not happy about that. And one of the things as counsel that he has to do is to get the voices of the people. So the tradition is he goes in like a very simple garment and goes down among the people, shows them the wounds, and then they say, yes, we think you should be counsel. And he does this, but he is very much of a person of the upper class and very arrogant, and he does it very arrogantly so that the people feel used afterwards, and so the tribunes stir them up then to take back their voices and to prevent him from becoming consul, which this then comes to a head. And because he is a hothead, once they start calling him traitor, he goes crazy, and so then they are able to say they should banish him, and so that's and then after he is banished, in the first big battle where I'm sorry, I'm doing a bad job of this because I do the whole play, and so I can go off into all of these.
Well, let's jump ahead.
The point about just his name, which is really important, because
right.
he won Coriolanus. That's why they call him Coriolanus.
Right. He takes the name of the place that he conquered.
So, yeah, sorry, that's the name.
Kind of like Macbeth, when he becomes the Thane of Cawdor, because he is his reign extends over Cawdor. That kind of thing. He defeated the Coriols, so it becomes Coriolanus. But Paul, something I just wanted to jump ahead to, if you would skip ahead kind of to a later part of the story, is where Coriolanus, after having been the leader, he's the general who had this great military victory. He's revered by the people. He's the leader, but with his misanthropic ways, with his elitist tendencies, he ends up alienating them. And eventually, they, as you said, they reject him. They banish him, and then he goes and he changes his alliance. Instead of being with Rome, suddenly he allies himself with the Volscians, whom he defeated in battle. Yeah, and with the Volscians,
And with the Volscians, he comes back to conquer Rome.
Right.
And it's really great because the tribunes are like, oh, isn't it so great? Everything's so great since Coriolanus is gone. And then they get the word that it's like, oh my God, he's coming back. Not only is Aufidius coming back, but Coriolanus is leading them. And so Rome, so then Menidius, who is Coriolanus' friend, tries to convince him and is unable to do anything. And then it's finally when his family, most particularly Volumnia, his mother, who has always sort of instilled in him the sense of duty, and who was always, behind his ambition to be consul, but who convinces him to not to destroy Rome, but to make a peace with them.
So Maria, I'll kick the discussion over to you for a minute. Thank you, Paul. Maria, Paul mentioned the very dominant figure of the mother of Volumnia in the play, and the influence she has over Coriolanus. What do you make of the two primary female figures in the play? You have the mother figure, which is Volumnia, and you have the wife, who is Virgilia, and they have this almost like a love-hate relationship. And they both seem to be pulling on Coriolanus from either side. What do you make of that relationship?
Right. So Coriolanus has most certainly been formed by his mother. She says, since he was very young, at an age when most mothers would be clasping their children to their chest, not letting them out of their sight, she sent him out in the wars, knowing that the most important thing was that he earn fame and become a man. To her, being a man, having virtue is equivalent to being brave, being indefatigable, never giving up in battle. She'd rather have him die nobly fighting than, she said, surfeit voluptuously, live idly at home. Virgilia doesn't take this attitude. She'd rather Coriolanus come home safely, even if he doesn't come home with any noble wounds. But she doesn't have the force of personality that Volumnia does. She's not the shaping force. Coriolanus calls her my gracious silence. Her biggest appeal to him at the end is a kiss, kind of appeal to his tenderness, whereas Volumnia goes at him rhetorically from all these different angles, in the same way she's done throughout the play, trying to convince him to become consul, as you said. So in a way, Coriolanus has had a very sort of unified direction in his life all the time. He respected his mother, he listened to his mother, and his mother said, be honorable, be true to yourself, go and fight for Rome, defend Rome, and those things all aligned, and that's what he did all his life. And then at the end, he hears her saying, defend Rome, but go against the thing you've sworn to do. Forgive your enemies, break faith with yourself. So she's splitting in his mind the things that have always been joined together. She's the one who told him to have this integrity.
Right.
Don't listen to the people. She scorns the people. And
Right.
that for him is really damaging once he gets to that point where the person he's listened to is giving him the opposite direction. That's what sort of forces, I think, it's part of what forces his tragedy at the end.
Isn't it
that underlying
unusual
hypocrisy that I find so interesting? And you see this many times in a lot of Shakespeare's war pieces, the hypocrisy of this, as you're saying, let's be patriotic, but only on our terms. Let's salute
Right.
the flag the way we want. And
right?
it's a very powerful message.
It seems like in Shakespeare's plays of Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, this is from the era around 1605 to 1606, right?
So I think around 1608,
1608, so a little bit later. So we see another dominant female figure like this a few years earlier in Macbeth, where Lady Macbeth is the one who is the aggressor and the one who encourages Macbeth to set aside his more tender feelings and his emotions, and to be a man, and to be aggressive, and to take the throne, take power. And it seems like we have a lot of that same relationship with Volumnia and Coriolanus, where she's demanding that he set aside these petty emotions and grab life by the horns and become the leader that he's destined to be.
Yeah, that's a great comparison, because there's such similarity in the roles that they play. Volumnia says to Coriolanus, thy valiantness was mine, you owe it to me, thou suckst it from me,
Right.
My mother's milk was bravery that poured into you. And Lady Macbeth says, take my mother's milk for gall, turn what is merciful into something fierce and bitter. And she talks about pouring her spirits into Macbeth's ear to expel the milk of human kindness from him.
Exactly. So it's almost the same imagery that's used between the one character and the other.
Exactly.
Now, what is it about that we've all heard of the trope of the overbearing mother, or for Virgilia it must be the overbearing mother-in-law, and the one that the son can never satisfy, can never anything does is never enough. Is this a trope that we're seeing that's something common in the writings of that period?
It's certainly not common in Shakespeare, and you get the impression from the play also that it's not common in this Roman sort of milieu that he's writing in. People comment on, he did it partly to please his mother. That's odd.
Right.
Shakespeare often has absent mothers. There's contests between fathers and their children, between Hal and Henry IV, or between Lear and his daughters. The mother's often missing. Here it's Coriolanus' father that's missing, but the mother has almost tried to make herself the father by trying to take into herself to be even more masculine than Coriolanus is and form him as a man in her mold. He talks about her as being his mold.
Is there any
unusual relationship?
Is there any reference to the father in this play?
Menenius calls himself being like Coriolanus' father, that he loved him like a father. So he sort of stepped into that role, but I don't think we hear very much about his biological father.
Right. So it's if you look at some of the other plays, you have Hamlet, you have Macbeth, you have there's always that regal king, the very dominant king, and often there's that very violent transition between the king and the usurper. But it seems like there's not necessarily that situation. There's more of that overbearing dominant mother, and I'm wondering, you were mentioning a little bit earlier about how King James I is trying to establish his rule in England at this time, and we talked about in a few of our previous episodes, we discussed Hamlet, we discussed Macbeth. One of the things that was a recurring issue in those discussions was the idea that the England that is transitioning from its tenure under Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, the beloved matriarch, to James I, who in some ways is seen as the usurper, the Scottish barbarian who is coming in to take over fair England. Could it be, and maybe I'm seeing something that's not necessarily there, but this is something that's kind of coming to me as we discuss this play, is that could it be that as Shakespeare in this era was writing for the court of James I. They were the king's men. Could it be that in some way Volumnia is some kind of representation of Elizabeth, of the battle axe, the old the dominant queen that had to have her way, and it is James I rejecting the legacy of Elizabeth in some way?
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought of it in those terms, though I can certainly imagine, Vanessa Redgrave playing Volumnia and Vanessa Redgrave, playing Elizabeth I. From what I've read, she sort of had a more pronounced kind of respect for the need to allocate power to different groups and not make herself into as absolutist a monarch as James did. So I don't know if
I don't think the public would see her that way, but in kind of connecting what we're talking about with Coriolanus being in some ways ripped from today's headlines, where a lot of what is happening in the news, it depends which spin doctor is telling you what the news is how you see it. We have some people that see what's happening in the news with Trump being impeached and the whole thing as finally this terrible leader is getting ousted. He's being hoisted by his petard, and other people see it totally opposite, that this poor unfortunate who's trying so hard is being put upon and betrayed by the people that we're supposed to. So depending on who is telling the story, it can be construed totally differently. So maybe it's something out of nothing, but maybe there's a thread to pull there where James I is trying to solidify his grip on the feelings of the populace and to almost demand that they respect him and they adhere to his wishes, and he's corrupting perhaps the memory of the fair, sweet, virginal Elizabeth and turning into this old, witch of a mother figure.
See, there's something interesting, and I'm glad this was brought up. It doesn't seem. It seems ironic and uncommon in the days of the Renaissance to have such powerful women figures.
Exactly.
You really go, if you go through Shakespeare, whether you're talking Portia, whether you're talking in Titus Andronicus, you're talking in Hamlet, there are these powerful women's figures. And I always wondered, especially since men played women, why create such a feminine force if it's going to be played by a man? Could it be Shakespeare, whoever he is, to almost create sort of like this homage, if you will, to the Queen? So even if we are listening to King James, we're always going to remember his predecessor. Paul, you've done all of Shakespeare's works 20 times just since I know you. Do you find the powerful women's roles, are they a positive force? Now, even though some of them are quite nefarious, are they a positive force, a negative force?
I mean, overall, I'd say they're a tremendously positive force. And I mean, I think it's one of Shakespeare's great achievement in breaking forth and bringing Juliet and Cleopatra and Rosalind and Beatrice and all of these great female characters, which Christopher Marlowe, I can't think of, I mean, I'm not of any interesting women that he wrote or in any other plays of the period,
Right.
Not even Ben Jonson, even in his seminal Volpone, are the women as powerful as anything in Shakespeare.
Yeah. And I think that in a way, I mean, they all are a tribute to Elizabeth because, I mean, he was born under Elizabeth. And so he was shaped by the idea of the supreme ruler of my country is a woman. So yeah, women can do things, even if they aren't allowed to perform on stage.
All right.
So, I mean, it is remarkable. It is sort of interesting. I mean, we don't know that much about his personal life other than that he was married to an older woman. And, I mean, there is just sort of a richness in his portrayals of women that I think are part of like why he's still resonant today. And so, I mean, I don't know that there are some points, I mean, actually in Henry VIII, he really gets very clearly where he puts in a little bit to say great stuff about Elizabeth and great stuff about James, where he really does that explicitly. But I mean, I think this is also, he used source material, and this is what the source material had. Yeah, and so I mean, but actually, I mean that it's like even that they made a sort of some temple to Volumnia and Coriolanus's wife for being able to prevent this sacking of Rome by convincing him to not do this. And of course, we haven't gotten to the very end of the play. Of course, Tullus doesn't make any objections while Coriolanus is making this deal. When he's there, you know, Coriolanus even asks him. He could say, "No way, we're gonna." But he lets him do it, and then he's like, "Did you see what that guy just did?" And then gets a bunch of guys, and his guys all kill Coriolanus. So,
and that seems to be a recurring theme in the Rome. We're discussing Coriolanus specifically, but we're also looking at the broader picture of the Roman plays, and that does seem to be the recurring theme in the Roman plays, where you know, at some point or other, your protagonist, whether it's Julius Caesar, whether it's Antony, whether it's Coriolanus, all of them somehow meet a grisly demise at the hands of the people that they trust the most. Which maybe that extends beyond the Romans, but it seems like it's particularly pronounced in those plays.
It's rather ironic because if you're reading the paper, Brutus McConnell is praising impeachment right now. So we're seeing this. Maria, I asked you first, but I opened it to everyone here. Is it human nature? You know, I'm calling Shakespeare clairvoyant because number one, he at some point realized that women are brilliant performers and created these roles for them. But also, is it simply human nature, the notion of betrayal, the notion of absolute power and all of this? That's why we're seeing it in ancient Rome, then we're seeing it in plays based on ancient Rome, and we're seeing it in the Daily News today. Is it just de rigueur?
Well, we did, thinking about this talk, we talked about the differences between a successful military leader and a successful political leader. And I think that's very pertinent here of, you know, why the story inevitably has to work out this way. And I think it does have to do with what kinds of traits are demanded for success in the military sphere. And they're almost the very same traits that would undermine your hope of success in the political sphere. And it's an absolute unwillingness to compromise, as some people have put it, an unwillingness to calculate costs and benefits for others or even to yourself, as the Norton introduction to this play puts it. That's part of what makes Coriolanus so successful in battle. He doesn't allow himself to even envision the possibility of retreating or compromising. And it's almost as if his enemies can read that intention in him. And like they say, you know, the very ground seems to like shrink before him. They know he's never going to stop. And that's part of why he's so fabulously successful. And of course, in politics, what you need is the ability to stop, to give way, to compromise, as Menenius does. It's very clear he doesn't like the people very much. He's no love to the tribunes, but he'll joke with them, he'll talk with them, he'll let them have the tribunes. And that's the kind of personality trait that would make you probably an easier target, right, in war, if your enemies could read that possibility in you. But in politics, it makes your enemies think, or your opponents think, well, he'll still make deals with us and he'll honor those deals. Whereas Coriolanus makes it very clear that he'll make no deals. He wouldn't honor them if he was forced to make them.
Isn't this
it's a personality trait that we see flare up in Rome, but also that we see in current day politicians, where if you define yourself, if what makes you exciting and appealing to people is your perceived strength, your inability, your unwillingness to compromise, that's also going to undermine your ability to succeed in a political arena.
You know, it's so funny you say that, because the old presidents, if we're talking our own history, the old presidents were all generals.
Right.
Eisenhower, they were generals. So there was one thought frame from them, but after that, we had career politicians. So we have yet another thought frame. So it's really interesting you say that.
It's if you were looking at the broader spectrum of the Roman plays, Coriolanus, as opposed to Julius Caesar, and even to some extent Antony, is a very prototypical idea of what the Roman general, the Roman leader, the centurion should be. You know, that very unfeeling, you know, the only thing that matters is victory and propriety, and human emotion doesn't really enter into it. So he's like the prototype of what a proper Roman military figure should be, whereas Julius Caesar is all emotion. He's anything but. He's much more of a politician than a general in many ways. But especially with what we spoke about with the breeding from his domineering mother, Volumnia, Coriolanus is bred to be the ideal Roman soldier, that almost harkening back to the Spartans of the Greek era, where it's all about physical strength, it's all about military victory, it's all about the rigor and the what's the word I'm looking for, where it's everything is very cut and dry. So in many ways he's doing what he is brought up to do, but that clashes with what the necessities, as Maria mentioned, and the realities of political life are. So he loses his footing once those things are required of him, and then his animosity towards the plebs, towards the civilians, makes its way out. Paul, where do you think that shows itself most fully with his antagonism towards the general public?
Well, I mean, he comes into the first scene where Menenius is making nice and just says, "Oh, they're all just trash," and then, but of course, in the scene where they end up banishing him, I mean, he really he really lets them have it in his final his great sort of final speech to them. I mean, that's really where they get to him, and because the thing is that it's also, I mean, he gets angry and he's a hothead, and he's just because he's from the nobility, he's rich, he's privileged, he's arrogant, and so that is something that the tribunes are just able to make so apparent to everyone, and because he doesn't want to hide it. I mean, common cry of curs whose breath I hate is reek of the rotten fens. I mean, it's such a great speech, where he just really lets them have it and expresses himself.
Can you see parallels to Moliere and the misanthrope with Coriolanus and his treatment of how it's almost as if there's the idea that he has to demean himself by catering to the civilians is offensive. Like, he shouldn't reduce himself to that. He should be very straightforward and tell people exactly what he thinks, and not feign feelings that he doesn't feel. It's almost as if that's an affront to his sensibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. His sense that sense of that what I feel is the greatest good, and I shouldn't have to worry about what you feel about the way I'm acting. All that matters is what I want and what I'm going to do, which is why it does have a lot of great parallels for political figures of our time. I mean, and it is.
I'm so glad you said that. It reminds me. Coriolanus basically says. Rome has. I'm not leaving Rome. Rome has not banished me. I'm banishing Rome.
Right.
No different than Ronald Reagan when he was asked. He said, "Oh, I'm not leaving the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me." So we're seeing clever political correlations. If I can be so clever with my words, to something like Coriolanus.
So usually in the tragedies, the wife figure seems to have more pull on the protagonists. Why is it? I'll throw it out to whoever wants to take this question. And we kind of touched on it before. Marie was talking about the relationship with Virgilia and how she isn't able to make the same impact on Coriolanus that Volumnia does. But why do we feel like there is not enough of that love relationship between the two of them for her to be able to sway her husband away from basically losing himself and sacrificing himself to his anger?
I mean, I think a lot of it is that, Volumnia, is setting the tone and sort of the household. I mean, that she's the one who sort of structures everything. And I think that it's also, it's like she's fulfilled the function in that he has a son. I don't know that he cares that much more about her. I mean, the number of times where these military guys are like, "Oh, it was like when I first saw my wife." I mean, as excited I am to see you now, I'm more excited to see you now than I was then. You know, I mean, that's what really gets him on is fighting, and both he and
Right.
Tullis really get off on it, and there's a real it's such an interesting dynamic in that I think that's really, if you want to, I mean, if you think of it as a sort of as a romantic relationship in a way, you know, where they come together and then break apart. I mean, where they're enemies at first and then come together and then, well, you know, doesn't end so happily.
We kind of see shades of this relationship in I'm thinking of two other Shakespeare plays where we have a kind of a parallel to this. One is with King Lear, how Cordelia is the one who's kind of like, you know, the most sympathetic figure, and she's the one that King Lear ignores, and we see everything all the tragic things that happen to her because of the more domineering sisters and their duplicitousness and everything else. But it seems like that figure, whether it's Cordelia, whether it's Virgilia, the one who's more soft-hearted and more sympathetic and, you know, more kind and tender, ultimately loses. She's not able to overcome well, Cordelia kind of wins, but ultimately they are not able to overpower the overwhelming evil of their peers. And the other relationship I was thinking of was it was just on the tip of my tongue, but it jumped away. It'll come back to me. But there was something else that I was thinking of that was even in another Roman, in Julius Caesar, you have the who's the one who's who has the I'm sorry,
You're thinking of Portia?
No, I'm not. In Julius Caesar, the one who has the premonition of
Calpurnia.
Calpurnia, right? And that I jog my memory. Calpurnia is the sister. She's the wife.
She's the wife of Julius Caesar.
She's right. So it's another wife figure who wants to protect the husband, but he just, as well-meaning as she is, as tender-hearted as she is, he's so steeped in blood, to borrow a phrase from another Shakespeare, that she can't pull him back from the abyss.
Is it am I far-reaching enough that I think Shakespeare has this production scheme that the strong woman is a woman by coincidence, that you don't have to change one line of dialogue and it could still be a man? I'm thinking of Lady Macbeth's line, "Come you spirits, unsex me here." All of these women, and I'm Rodney, I'm listening to you, and I'm listening to both of you say this, and it's interesting. Yes, there's always the Ophelia, there's always the soft, tender woman who suffers, and then there's the woman that takes out her womanness and says, "Okay, I'm a woman by coincidence," and she seems to have this success, much like a virgin queen would not have given too much love. So I'm seeing this very powerful figure. Maria, do you see these correlations as you've gone through them? Paul, also, I asked you, have you gone through these characters and said, "Oh, there's another male woman, there's another macho woman in there"? Am I far-reaching when I think that?
That's a great point, and I think the theory about the king's two bodies, Elizabeth would, if I'm remembering correctly, have this idea that, my private personal body is that of a woman, but in my public body as a monarch, I'm a king, I'm a prince. I'm entering into this masculine habit. And we could think about the interest in the comedies too, about how women acquire power by taking on male garb. But I think especially for the Roman world, where there's just this neat binary sort of alignment, or presented initially as such, of all the different values. What does it mean to be valuable? It means to be strong, it means to be political, it means to be public, sort of less emotionless, all these things that are sort of coded male, and the opposite, to be weak or to be more changeable, sort of coded female. And I think you're right that it sort of presents, unfortunately, women with the options of being sort of the domestic, the Virgilia, not stepping out over the threshold, or the woman who says, you are my soldier, I made you a soldier, I'm as good as a man.
So
and
how do we...
But I think the fact that, like, the fact that there's a woman still there, I think people discuss this a lot when they ask, what is Coriolanus's tragedy exactly at the end? And some critics read it as his mother reminds him of his own weakness, of his own dependency, that there's something feminine in him, or we could just say human, that he's not immortal and invulnerable. Or other critics have said it's that he realizes that his mother is vulnerable, that she's needy, that she's dependent. And that is something that he decides to step forward and sort of save her from, by not allowing her to suffer the humiliation of defeat and rejection.
That's very smart,
even at the cost of himself. I think that's
a really good observation. I hadn't seen that one before. That's very good.
That's very clever, because you can then equate so many other characters that way. Lady Macbeth going mad, again, it's there's a weakness within her. The whole indecision of Queen Gertrude in Hamlet. Again, we're looking at a weakness, if you will. So that's a really interesting point.
Here's something that kind of takes that and kind of runs with it, and you let me know what you think about this. So if we're seeing this idea that the more dominant female figure isn't necessarily preferable, but is always wins out over the soft-hearted, more tender character, how do we square that with another representation of such a strong woman with Taming of the Shrew, where Taming of the Shrew, where you have that strong woman that has to be subdued and has to be bridled? Or maybe that's a discussion for another day. How do we square the one and the other? Is this again? Is this something that is an archetype of the strong woman that they're trying to deal with in post-Elizabethan England, or is this something that's just the nature of you have, this is just part of society. You have the overbearing mother, you have the soft-hearted wife. It's just part of the family dynamic.
Well, I mean, I think that part of what's interesting and why you're starting to get a variety of different things, and I think that there's so many great, Shakespearean women who sort of transcend these categories because he's sort of not seen gender as being as defining of someone's characteristics, that you have someone who can still be female and be very tough. And that's like even from the early plays. Queen Margaret, is a really amazing portrait. For so early in his career to have this, and then of course in Tamara, because actually the one that really makes the case for what you're saying very, very explicitly is Titus, and the other Roman play, Titus Andronicus, with Lavinia and Tamara. Yeah.
Right. Perfect.
Doesn't come out too well for Lavinia. But.
Right. Yeah, it seems like the one that we as an audience might sympathize with the most is always the one that unfortunately comes up short. She can never quite overcome all the travails that she experiences in the play. So
move on. I'd want to throw in one more category to the sort of softer or tougher, is like the wit.
Go ahead.
Volumnia says, when she's trying to get Coriolanus to speak nicely to the tribune, she says, "I have a heart as little apt as yours, but yet a brain that leaves my use of anger to better vantage." Saying, I'm gonna use my brain here. And I think in my mind, that's where I see Catherine as ending up Kate in the Taming of the Shrew, that she decides to put her brain, to better vantage for herself, to figure out how she can get ahead in this game, beating Petruchio and then joining Petruchio to sort of beat everyone else, as it were. That would be my reading on the play. And I think like Mistresses Ford and Page and the Merry Wives of Windsor, using their wit to outdo their male sort of opponents too.
Not to get cinematic, but you're right. In terms of Taming of the Shrew, the ending of the famous film version of Taming of the Shrew, after her famous soliloquy at the end, you see Petruchio running after her. She says her last line, she disappears from camera, and he goes running after her. So you sort of get the idea, okay, she said she'd be the dutiful wife, but who's running after who now? So it's really interesting you say that. Very clever.
Maybe the idea is that you take all of that, that dominant quality, and you put a little bit of politics in it, a little bit of the ability to to know how to appease people. And then you have the right combination. You have the strength and you have the ability to change people's hearts, to change people's minds. So with that being said, why don't we connect back to what is happening in the news at the moment, where we've seen all this happen in Coriolanus. We've seen the general who is so popular and so beloved because of his show of strength to the people, to all of his supporters, who ultimately at some point decides that he can no longer tolerate them or feels rejected or scorned by them in some way. And then because he feels scorned by them, he flips to the other side and he goes to the Volscians. Can we see some parallel in what's happening in the current events right now?
Did you say the Volscians or the Russians? I didn't hear you.
Obviously, we're correlating Coriolanus to Trump here, where we have the I wouldn't say populist leader, but in some ways it is. He's a leader. Not because he's one of the people, but because he's revered by the people. But then that relationship sours fairly quickly when he can no longer maintain that relationship with them and appease them the way that they want to be appeased. And I don't think that's necessarily a direct parallel to what's happening in the U.S. here. I think Trump does an excellent job of speaking to his base and keeping them on board with his message. But it seems like there is, in these final days, as Trump is on his way out, he's impeached for a second time, and even some of the people that were his supporters in the Republican Party have turned the other way and have indicted him for his involvement in the attempted coup. Some people call it a protestation, whatever you might want to call it, however you want to phrase that. So if you correlate Trump and Coriolanus, maybe you see that Trump right now would be raging against his one-time supporters, and you kind of see that with whoever is not a loyalist is quickly dismissed and fired and whatever else.
I will not quote Mr. Trump, but his comments about his vice president, who was his confidant for 4 years, really shows that yes, he is letting go of his people at a furious pace.
If we take what's in the text here of Coriolanus, would it stand to reason to expect that in 2024 Trump is going to run for the Democratic Party? The Democrats being the Volscians in this equation. Jay, you seem dumbfounded by
you laugh, but I don't see it the Democratic Party. I see at last we're going to have a third party. I see the Republicans distancing themselves just enough, or enough of them, and the Democrats would rather die. But I could suddenly see some form of independent party run by Mr. Trump. And we'll call it the people wearing horned hats party, but basically I could see him gathering his base together and making their own party, whether that succeeds or not. So yes, I see him going off to another land. That other land could very well be here, just that land could be another thought process.
All right. Oh, well, it seems like we are.
If we have a minute, I would love to
Go
just
ahead.
as a tribute to the power of Shakespeare's plays, because they offer sort of no easy answer to different questions, that I think you could see it as the opposite way, that it's not Coriolanus that's the parallel for our current president. It's more like the tribunes. Coriolanus, the play opens by saying he's the chief enemy to the people. People hate him. They grudgingly give him admiration because he's an elite in some way, right? He's an elite fighter. Their representatives are the tribunes, who say, we speak for you, we speak for the people. But what they say to each other is, if he's not destroyed, our authority is at an end. We want to keep our power. And that's why they get the people behind them to sort of expel Coriolanus and start a riot that proceeds violently at the Capitol. And this production has been played in different ways in different times. It's been played as celebrating sort of autocracy under autocratic states, and it's been portrayed as celebrating the power of the people in Soviet-era productions. And so I think it definitely speaks to our moment, but it offers different characters who could speak to our moment.
That's such a great way to take the idea and kind of flip it around. But it's a very valid reading of it. That's fantastic, Maria.
Really interesting. Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, we're approaching the end of our. Paul, did you have something you wanted to throw in before we?
No, I just wanted to agree that I really like the point that Maria had made there, because it is in certain sort of way. I mean, like if it was a parallel, I mean that the people would be rising up for Coriolanus, and
Right.
and to the idea of equating Trump with, I mean, any kind of real success at anything is tough. I mean, because it was
It's a stretch.
I mean, I don't know what's, I mean, it's like no military leader will just march and go and try and take over the Capitol. You know, I mean, it was
Chaos.
it was an insurrection, I guess is the word that we can use to call them. And there are similarities to some of the things we see in Coriolanus. But actually, it's makes me happy. That makes me think in some ways, even though there's not great improvements in our republic over Rome's, in this way, it's like, yeah, we are, we're still here. So let's just
Existentially speaking, yes.
Let's hope that things end better here than they do in the
Oh my
Shakespeare's
God.
text.
Before we go, Paul, I wanted to very quickly. I've been meaning to tell you this for years. When I first met Paul Sugarman for the Instant Shakespeare, he was doing part of his season in my theater on East 74th Street, Genesis Repertory. And there was one night, I think we were doing Richard II or Richard III. We were doing a Richard or a Henry or something like that. and that night in the audience, now you had about 10 or 12 people on stage, if not more. That night in the audience, we had one person. One person showed up to the performance. And I remember we debated, should we not go on or whatever? And we all kind of shrugged and said, please, we're all here. Let's just do it for the fun of it. And we did the show for that one person. Paul, I don't know if you remember this performance. It was one person in the audience. He saw it, he applauded, he got up and he left. What I don't know if you know, that person was Roger Armbrust. And at that point, he was one of the chief editors of Backstage. The Instant Shakespeare got a huge article praising its work in Backstage at that point. I may still have that article in my archives. If I do, I'm definitely sending you a copy. But it shows, even if there's one person in the audience, you just go on. So I always wanted to tell you that story.
Wow, that's great. Yes, because I do. I have copies of that article as well.
You do remember it. Good. Okay.
Nicest write-ups we ever had. And so and that's great. And yeah, we do it for one person. I mean, in some of the things, if you have more people than audience, it used to sort of be, it's like, well, then we don't have to go on and do the show. But we're only getting together to do a reading of the play because we want to read the play. So we're going to read the play even if there's nobody there. So
right. The show must go on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Well, listen.
It's a reward in itself.
Absolutely. And Shakespeare's words, Shakespeare's mastery lives on through our recitation of his words, our discussion of his plays, and endures, and I'm sure will endure for far longer than any of us are around. Paul, Maria, Jay, I thank you so much for an enlightening and fascinating discussion tonight of Coriolanus. I think we had some really, really interesting discoveries and some really good points that were made. And all around, I think there was a lot of great stuff that was thrown around. Any final comments, anyone, before we wrap it up for this evening?
Thank you both very much. It was absolutely marvelous speaking to you, Rodney. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, and both of you. It's real, Paul, great to connect with you again, and Maria, to meet you. It's really been marvelous. It was really a marvelous discussion.
I'll just say, why don't we give Paul and Maria a plug before they head off into the sunset? Paul, where can people find you if they want to check out the Instant Shakespeare Company?
I've got. Find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. We used to have a Yahoo group, but Yahoo groups are no more. And we do it on Zoom. We do readings on Saturdays and generally like Thursday evenings. And so you can do that. Also, at some point, maybe my website will be decent enough that I can tell people about it. But
so go to
but
Facebook and look up
is,
Instant
is
Shakespeare
the
Company.
way, yeah, Instant Shakespeare Company. You can join the group and find out about readings, and we're always want more people to read. So
And they're wonderful.
And they're great. They're great. And Maria, your fantastic website with the courses about Shakespeare, it's shakespeareforall.com, correct?
That's right. Check it out.
Shakespeare for All. And they have a bunch of courses that are already there and many more on the way. A lot of great things to check out there.
Maria, please send me a link. I would love to spread the word.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Jay. Well, it's been a fantastic, another voyage in the Fourth Folio. And I look forward to what's coming up next, which I believe is Love's Labour's Lost.
And after that, I think maybe we'll start looking at the apocryphal works.
Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. All the best.
Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year.
yes, Happy New Year. Thank you all very much. It's a fun discussion.